So welcome back, everybody. Normally, somebody who is chairing something is somebody who is known both to the audience and the speaker or participants. In this case, I think there's probably a number of people here who don't know me because I don't make many appearances at the Buddhist Centre these days. So I need to just let you know who I am. My apologies for that. I kind of know all the old folk, but so I'm Cayman Andy, who Parami was referring to on the video link. I'm actually stepping in today to sort of host this conversation in lieu of Akashati, who's got a lot on her plate at the moment, as probably many of you know. So I'm just stepping in at short notice to do this. And I will say a little bit myself probably along the way, but it's mostly going to be an opportunity for these folks here to say a few words and for us all to kind of interact a little bit. Hopefully there will be time for some questions or some exchanges. So that's my hope, that we'll see how it goes. I personally have found it quite interesting thinking about doing this, having sort of put my past sort of back there where it belongs and sort of moving forwards in my life, and thinking back to all that time ago, and particularly Maitreya Darshan's sort of suggestion that we think about where we were 50 years ago. I was 17 doing my A levels, not doing so many drugs, but doing plenty of the other stuff. I might say it's kind of a bit more about the more serious bits of that part of my life. But yeah, thinking back, to quite a long time ago, and it was quite a long time ago when I was chairing the centre, for instance, every time I kind of, land on something, my memory, my brain goes off like Parami's fireworks on her Zoom, And so I've been a bit all over the place really with trying to think about what on earth do I say. So I was extremely grateful when Maitreya Darshan did his beautiful introduction to the dedication of the centre, because one of my things I sort of wanted to say was that, and what's all this about? What's this place about? What's our collective community history about? And I think Maitreya Darshan set it, very beautifully into context. So I'm not going to repeat that. And then I was thinking about the connections we have with our particular, with the society, with the time in history, with our local society, with our culture, where we are in terms of our human history, the history of the planet. And this is where we are, in a way, trying to wake up to something, that the Dharma has spoken to us about. And Parami also covered all of that territory beautifully in hers. So here we are, we've all heard all of that. We're here really to think about, how it is we've got to be here and what we are all about as a Sangha and as practitioners of the Dharma. And while we're choosing, the organisers of this celebration have chosen to focus on people who are chair people during history, it's like, it's not about us, it's about the people that we were part of, the groups of people we were part of, what we were all doing together. It's about our connections, the people we worked with, who we picked up from, who we handed on to, as the Sangha grew and developed and people moved away and new people came in and so on. So it's very much about, it's about the Sangha, it's about many, many more people than you see sitting here, some of whom are in our audience today, which is lovely. So just really bear that in mind. And we're all here because the Dharma is kind of, we've got a sort of spark of something that's come through learning meditation, Buddhism. Something has got us here, and that's why we're coming, and that's what today and everything else is about when we come here together. So just remember your own deep reasons for being here and what it means to you. Even if there's a complex set of kind of feelings and responses to that, just maybe by the end of this weekend, you'll feel a little bit more grounded in what this is really about for you. and what part you play in the whole. I hope that's the case. One day we can celebrate our lives together here. So, 15 years ago, as I said, I was 17 and doing my A levels. I actually heard about the Brighton Buddhist Centre before I left school from a friend's mother, because I was quite interested in meditation and things generally esoteric. But I never found my way here. There was another probably 3 or 4 years until I found my way here. Does quite interest me. I then went from school to Sussex University, where there were people doing things at university, and I didn't cross paths with them either. But yes, that's where I was kind of searching a bit. And meanwhile, something was rippling and rumbling around in Brighton, and Cassandra is going to probably introduce just a little bit of that kind of history, because initially, another member called Buddhadasa was here. Bhante had kind of handed over the kind of the vision of making a Buddhist centre. And then Cassandra came and picked up the baton at some point for a little while, and then we went on to Mangala, but I will say more about each person as we go along. That's okay. So I would like to pass on to Cassandra, who's been in and out of my life for very, very, very many years, and is a much respected teacher of mine and friend and a big person. So, okay, so I know you weren't planning to do this particularly, and you've been on retreat, leading a retreat, and you're in a lovely space from that, I think, because you've had a great time. So we're just gonna, soak up the love and hear whatever you've got to say, and possibly just to introduce some of the things that we've got on the shrine today, which speak very much to our history. And seem to know about it. I'm sure a number of us as well. There we go.
Thanks very much, Kim and Andy. It's a real pleasure and delight to be back in the centre here. I've spent many a happy hour up here giving talks to roomfuls of people like this, and it's always felt very special and precious to me to come here. I was also, I have a long connection with Brighton because I lived here when I was a second chair, and I came back. I lived here for a few years in the 1990s, and for a long time I was president of the centre. So there are these different chains, So there's a chain of chairs, there's a chain of presidents. So from me to Ratnaprabha to Parami, there's chains of mitra conveners for men and women, all sorts of down all these years. It's really lovely to be sitting with six Brighton chairs. I think Maitri Darshan must be about the 9th or 10th, something like that, over 50 years. It sort of reminds me a bit of Doctor Who, actually. It's the one Brighton chair, and we keep, so it was Buddhadasa originally, who then regenerated into me and calmed down. And this is like one of those episodes where quite a lot of them all come together. And in about 45 minutes, we're going to save the world from the Daleks. But the whole of Brighton to the Dharma. So I was the second ever chair, and I'm not going to say very much now, partly because I'd really like to hear the others, but also because I'm on here tomorrow morning. So as well as sharing some meditation, we'll do some guided meditations and things. I'll also take the time then to tell you about actually the origin of the centre, where it started. With Bhante Sangharakshita and Buddhadasa, and then me doing my bit until I passed on to Mangala. It's quite lovely. There are one or two things like this gong or the rupa on the shrine here, which, you know, I recognized from 50 years ago, you know, which are just carried on. The puja bowls on the shrine, they came from the English Sangha Trust, who first invited Bhante Sangharaksh to, you know, to come and stay when he came back to the West. They invited him back to teach. So we have some of these things which just link us with the whole history of Triratna. And you know, things like that are sort of old friends for me, in the same way as there are lots of old friends in the room. So I was here not very long as chair. Buddhadasa started the centre. He can't be with us. He has an even better alibi than Parami, in as much as he lives in the Southern Hemisphere now. And then I moved down to join him in the summer of 75. And I was only chair through till the end of 76. But yes, it was the real early days. So I have a very strong sense of, how we helped Triratna to sort of take root in Brighton in those days. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow. And it's all grown from there. And I'll save saying anything else because, yes, I've got tomorrow morning. My friends here don't. So very good to see everybody. And I'll pass you on to Mangala, who became chair 1976. Yes, end of. Yeah, when you rounded on, yeah. Indeed. You'll go. Okay. Unless you want to answer something.
Just want to very briefly say it's lovely to see you back here, because our paths cross on retreat sometimes. It's just lovely to see you here again, Mangala. And I have great gratitude to you for being in the centre when I came along, and some of the teaching that you do with Dharmananda and Surata, but mainly you and Dharmananda. And you made me Mitra in 1981. And it was like it is for all of us, it was a very significant moment in my life when I decided to sort of go public with what I was doing. Much appreciation to you. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you. And you too.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd just like to apologize for probably a lot of you because I think there are a lot of people who I know and have met, but I just don't remember people these days. I'm sorry. I was talking to Mokshini earlier, and after a few minutes, there you are. I've actually spoken to her several times in the past, and so it's quite possible that the people here that I sort of blank out, and I'm not being rude, believe me, I just forget things. And yes, on that connection, I was here 10 years ago for the 40th anniversary, and I really cannot believe it's 10 years. I know that's the sort of thing everybody says, but I really can't believe it. I just don't know where the time has gone, and but anyway, we're all getting older, so. Yeah, and like the Santra, I remember this gong as well, many times hitting that. I think at a different stand, maybe in the early days, but just at a couple of metal sort of the things you put shells up with, so it's holding it up. And I remember the Rupa very well as well. So I don't really know what I'm supposed to say, but one thing I did think about earlier was why did I come here? Well, I've been living in Aryatara community for about 3 and a bit years, in the early 70s. And I got ordained when I was there in 1973. And then I decided to leave for various reasons. I spent about a year sort of moving around a bit. And then in 1976, it was that wonderful summer. Well, some of you are much too young to remember, but look, it was a summer to end all summer. Really was. We've become quite used to wonderful summers now, haven't we, the last 20 years or so, but back then it really was something else. And I came down to Brighton, partly because Ashtajit was here at the time, and he was a really, really good friend of mine. We got on really, really so well. It was just tiny little community, just him and me, I think. And Kuladeva, ex-Kuladeva, living in George Street, one of the two of them. I don't remember, but anyway. And we got on just fabulously well. And it's that gorgeous summer. We just go on to the beach every day, you know. And just it was just so wonderful. I just completely fell in love with Brighton, and it was just lovely. And then a little bit later, yes, the chair became vacant, empty, and I hadn't been thinking about that at all initially when I came here. Just a nice place to be. But then Vasanta left, and the chair came vacant, and I suddenly decided. I don't quite know how I decided, but it just popped up. Yes, I want to take this on and do it. And I remember writing to Bante about it, and he said, "Yeah, go for it." He didn't say that, but you know, he encouraged me to sort of do it, and so I did, and I took it on with a real appetite. I really wanted to do it. I suppose I was kind of a bit ambitious, as it were, yeah, but I had energy and vision. And my vision wasn't my vision exactly. It was more like Bante's vision. I was just so kind of, well, like many of us were in those days, we were really excited by Bante and his teaching and the whole kind of vision he had about spreading the Dharma. And I really, really was completely behind that, you know. We all hung on every word Bante spoke in a way. And there's no kind of reservations at all. And I think of that a bit more recently, and I think sometimes that probably did lead me to doing some not terribly skillful things. I think I probably, like for example, I remember one good guy actually called Ian Anderson, and he used to be involved just before I came down, even a bit after I came down, but he'd donated a lot of books to the centre and the library used to be upstairs. And I remember going through the books, and anything that wasn't by Bante, basically I threw it out. We used to sell secondhand books downstairs, not put a lot in that to sell the ones that I didn't think were, you know, quite the ticket as to where quite what people should be reading. And he was a bit offended about it, quite understandably, because I mean there were decent books, but I was so religious about we must promote Bante. You know, anything else just didn't cut it at all. So that's the kind of thing, and a few other things too I probably did where I was a bit insistent on doing things in a certain kind of way. But it wasn't just me flexing my muscles. I think and yes, and also like Sunrise Restaurant. I mean, this was set up by a few people Buddhadasa had made mitras, and then I came down. I wanted to kind of integrate it very much into the center. It seemed to be a little bit of a slightly its own thing, as it were. But in doing that, I didn't probably do it very well, and I sort of tread on a few toes and got a bit of kickback for it as well. But anyway, but really, I was just trying to. I was very, very promoting the FWB as it then was. That's in a way all I cared about, and I lived for that. That was really what my whole life was about. And actually, this is a very personal thing. I think I've ever said this in public before, but for like about 3.5 years when I first came here, I was completely chaste, like no sex at all, of any description with anybody, even myself. And I sometimes thought about why was that? And I was going to say I didn't have the time. It wasn't much the time. I just didn't have the inclination. I was just so kind of focused on what I was trying to do that sex just didn't have any part in it, really. You know what I mean? Just didn't really part of the equation. What else to say? And we had some very successful businesses. Initially, there was Sunrise that had been started before me, and that sort of continued. But then we had a very and there was a little shop as well in George Street. But Ray Daguerre, who's not here, I don't think, he sort of was interested in taking it over. He sort of took it over and made it quite a successful. We call it Windhorse Emporium. which did rather well. And that might have been where Parmy got his dungarees from. It probably was, actually. Windhorse and Porter. And then we also had a gardening business, which Parmigioti was part of. Him and John Marshall, and we called it Bel Air Gardening, which I thought was a great name. That was my idea. Thought it sounded a bit flashy, good. So those are kind of businesses, yes. But yeah, and I suppose another major event was moving the centre from George Street to Park Crescent Place. And that was, I have to say, that was largely due to Peter Field, who I don't think is here. He was here 10 years ago, I remember that. And he was an estate agent in Brighton that Buddha Das had got to know. And he was so helpful. In every way, basically, he would tell me, okay, this place is available, but I think it might be worth having a look at. And we went and had a look at it. But before that, we managed to buy George Street as well. But again, that was all his doing. He kind of tell me you could do this and you could try that, and this would be worth getting or not getting. And he just did it all. I said, well, yeah, let's do it. What do I do next? Well, you got to go and you get that bit of paper and take this there and you do that. And he basically did it, So he was so helpful, Peter Field. Amazing. All right.
Just
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And well, I will just finish too. I'll just finish on that point about the centre. And Nyanosh will know this very well, and Parmigioti, but Nyanosh, he was our kind of treasurer at the time, but we were thinking, how could we buy this place, Park Crescent Place? And we were completely penniless, basically, you know what it was like in those days. And thought, well, and he had a friend who was working a mortgage broker or something like that. And we had a chat, and he said, well, yeah, you could get a mortgage, but you'd have to find somebody who earned at least 20 grand a year. This was 1976 or something like that, 20 grand a year, and who didn't have a mortgage of their own and who would act as guarantor. They think, oh, well, that's easy, isn't it? Plenty of people earning 20 grand a year back then and who haven't got their own mortgage. So we thought, well, thanks, yeah, great. But then Parmigioti sort of popped up and he said, well, my dad earns that's a lot. And I said, well, look, would you put in a good word for us? And as it happened, I'd known his dad and his mother, because his mother used to come to Arya Tara when I lived there, and I used to teach her yoga, Phyllis, and we got on very well. And so he asked his father if he would act as guarantor, and his father said yes, believe it or not. So we got a mortgage. And
my dad trusted you more than I did.
Anyway, but what that taught me, and I'll shut up after this. What that taught me was that when you really want something, something you can probably make it happen if you want it enough. You can probably find a way to do it. If you're a bit sort of half-hearted, well then probably not. But if you really want to, you'll find a way to do it. And we did. I wanted to get that, and and it happened. So thanks very much, Marjorie, and thank you, Anotra, and thank you, everybody. And I'll hand on to. I was just going to say very, very briefly. This will be brief. There should be another person sitting here who's Devaraja.
Oh yes.
But unfortunately, Devaraja. Well, he resigned some years ago, but he took over from me because I wanted to move on, and I asked him if he would become the chair, and he did. But then later he got a bit disaffected with Triratna and resigned. So, but there should be David arguing. But with that, I'll hand on to Yasha David.
So thank you. I was going to mention David Roger as well. Yeah. So time as it is, let's move swiftly on to Yasha David, who sort of picked things up in a very kind of hands-off, gentle way when our Sangha was a little bit kind of like uneasy with itself, I think, and carried us through. And one thing I remember about you is your craftsmanship and friendliness and really kind of down to earth. Well, sort of very, you had a lovely ordinary, very available sort of side to you that was really there. And you made all these beautiful things in the centre and you fixed stuff. And you were just there in a lovely kind of gentle background way. And very important person in our history. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really, really great to see you all here. Some friends from many, many years ago. And I'm very conscious that, we're sat here, but there's so many of, you here, the poet and manager, and all sorts of people who've given so much to this centre. And it's should have one of these for the mixed conveners and one for the treasurer and stuff like that. But and I would like to say something about ex Devaraja, because he was even ordained before you, I think, was he? Yeah. So he was maybe in the late 60s he was ordained. I don't know, probably 70s. 72 or 77. But yeah, he was a very good friend of mine, and I'm a little bit in touch with him now. At Astana, where I live now, been there 12 years. We've got some artwork of his there. So there's a triptych kind of outside the shrine which he painted, and he still paints. He's still a very dedicated painter of Buddhist images mainly, and he lives as a bhikkhu in Spain, South Spain. So he's still very much a Buddhist, but pretty much he runs a little group. He has a little group there in Spain. Anyway, he's alive and well, I think. So I took over from him. This was in I think it was in 80s. I think it was 87. I think it was in 1987 I took over. So I was ordained in 81 when I was 20, and there were other chairs that became chairs when they were in their 20s. Quite a few in London and so on. So it wasn't that unusual for someone 26 years old, whatever it was, to become chair of a centre. You just needed to be sort of enthusiastic and have a regular practice and enjoy the sangha and just be into it really and be relatively clear about what the Dharma was. At least one thinks one was, and put yourself forward and it was great. What an opportunity to just dive in and find out how to do something. Be responsible for an institution, meet lots of people, and just suddenly a world, really quite big and exciting. I was at Art College in Brighton. I grew up in Brighton. I was at Art College, and I was very, very grateful for Mangala being around. He was my first. Well, you are my Kalyana Mitra, one of my Kalyana Mitras, and we're very much in touch, and very, very grateful for what those who came before me, and and still around. Fantastic. So that's one of the delights of so many years passing, is that we've just got such good friends, in the order, having spent decades and decades sort of, seeing each other across a shrine room or chats or, projects. There's just a huge amount of history. And I've got an identical twin brother, but he's lived a completely different life to me, He's got hundreds of friends, which is marvellous. And I went from here to Kukuloka. I lived in Kukuloka 12 years, and that was in 93. And then I had a bit of a wobble and went to Valencia and got married and did building work. And then I went to Adastana back in 2012 and helped put all that thing together. And I've been working there, and I'm very much involved in the Spanish ordination process now. So that's my main kind of Dharma work really is with Spain. But I still mend toilets and fix lights and it's all digital now, LEDs and the rest of it. And so I still do all that. And I have a day job, and then I do all my Spanish stuff, and I paint watercolors and things. And I'm part of a local choir in the local town. So I have a lovely, rich life. But yeah, Brighton was sort of just really picking up from what Mangla and Devaraja left me, really. There was a centre, a very nice centre, and actually ex-Devaraja actually, I think he somehow speeded up the process of paying for the centre, and it was it was fully owned, I think, after about 10 years. So there was some quite good force, thinking, we should do this, and that worked out very well. The restaurant had gone, and I mean, my main memory really of my time in Brighton was working with you.
Yes.
I mean, we had such a laugh, and we had so much fun. It really was a team thing, like you're saying. I think I was quite a light. I just sort of got people together, and we enjoyed each other, Jenna Parter, and we had the community living in the Buddhist centre at Park Crescent Place, and then after a few years, we shifted. The 6 of us moved around the corner, and you went up to another community, Jenna Parter, up the hill, and so we had a few communities. So there was a lot of team type things, I think that's what I was most. When I look back, I think there were 3 things that I really loved was running the regulars class. That was my sort of thing. There was like the temple. It was the temple on Tuesday nights. We always do the puja, and we do a double meditation and a puja, or meditation, communication exercises, puja, tea break. So we were there till probably 10 o'clock, 7:30 till 10. We'd just do lots of practice. Occasionally talks and things, but I was just a complete addict to the Tuesday what we call regulars class, and that was very special, and that led in very well to the other thing, which was festivals. We really went for festivals. I mean, Sangha Day, we'd have 3-day festivals. I mean, we might have meals, we'd have a jumble sale, we had big pujas. And sometimes we had readings all the way through the night with chanting. So it was a real, real bash, and you and I and Dominic and Dharmavasata and other people, we'd all be Jinapalasa, we'd all be creating these big events. I mean, maybe now you still do that sort of thing. I don't know, but I think it was great fun, and there was the hilarious instance of I must tell you this, when we decided to take the walls out of the shrine and the community moved, and the next one day this pile of beams ended up on the pavement outside in the road. And they're like 7-meter long bits of wood like this.
You couldn't lift them.
They were massive, and they were damp from newly made and that. And I had this idea of what's just sticking them up through the eaves, up into the roof. But that wasn't going to happen. We realised we need a crane. And so the image in my mind is like, you were stood on the sort of bay window, top of the window, talking to the crane driver. I was we bashed a hole in the roof. And I was inside the roof. I think we came out. Were you in there? You were, weren't you? And there was 2 of us were in there. And then after a few hours, we had all these beams inside the attic. It was bonkers, It was like that game Chopsticks, where when you tell to pull one out, they were 7 meters long, So it was just absolute brazen sort of foolishness, but it worked. I did have an engineer to tell us what sort of spec you needed, for the wood. I've carried on doing that. But it was just so tremendously exciting. And we just worked together a lot. Mm-hmm. We just learned everything, plumbing, plastering, whatever. We just got on with it and made it. I remember when Suraj left, And I couldn't bear the idea of not having any money for yoga. So I said, I'll do something quite bendy, you know. Until so he just said, yeah, just get them to enjoy their bodies. And just call it stretch and relax. So I just sort of kept it going until you turned up and did a proper job. You know. So anyway, it's just, and that, I suppose, and then what was it? So they had that regulars class, and then just in the community and working together, and I do think there's the sort of secret, I think, really of Tree Ratner is, you know, there's one thing you learn a practice, you know, you get something for yourself and you learn it and you start trying to work on your mind. That's stage one. Stage two is sort of helping other people to do that, getting them involved, but helping people get involved. But I think the third stage is that you somehow you stop being one or the other, and you just all do something together.
Yeah.
You know, you just create an atmosphere, and it's more than you, but you all, you know, you're sort of feeding things back to each other, and you're working together, and there's an atmosphere. You know, you feel it on, you know, maybe on a festival day or something, but you really feel it, and everyone's there for each other, and yeah, it's very, very special. And you know, I've carried on that kind of life, I suppose. You know, at the institutions I've been involved with. Yeah, I'm a great fan of our institutions. Yeah, that's me, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, yes, thank you. Yeah. I'm just going to say a couple of words, not for very long because of time passing. I was just thinking about some of the things that sort of stood out while I was chairperson in Brighton, and like what the time was like, really. I just have a sense that things have been very focused in on a small group of people, the Sangha really establishing itself, people doing their stuff. And I think by the time I became chairperson, there was much more of a kind of expanding sort of sense of Buddhism in the community in the UK and around our centre. Things were starting to open out. People were starting to get in communication with other Buddhist groups, for instance. We had other Buddhist groups setting up in Brighton. In terms of the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, which we were then, we had Buddhafield happening, and the Buddhafield community, sort of when they weren't often fields, were living over the road from us. And you know, there was just quite things that were sort of opening out and diversifying. And so it's quite an exciting time, really. Some of the satellite centres around were kind of happening, and I think thinking into, you know, some of the things that I kind of really enjoyed most about my time actually comes back to some of the people called teaching, but it's just some of the classes and groups that I was involved with. You know, we'd have a kind of friends night or a kind of practice meditation session, and we just have these discussions and conversations around the Dharma. So it would be a kind of mix of practice and, you know, quite in-depth conversation about stuff. And it was just magic. We made these amazing connections, and it was so kind of sparky, and you know, I got so much from it. Everybody got a lot from it, and you know, one of the people who was around then was Maitri Darshan, who keeps on every time we meet, comes up and says, "Kaimanandi, you taught me to meditate." And thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done with that practice that you learned in our old centre in Park Crescent Place, and you know, of being part of that very fertile culture at that time where people were just exchanging. And I was also very, I suppose, from having got involved in a movement that I thought was huge when I first got involved in, then realised how absolutely tiny it was, and then realised that I was one of very few women in a movement that was basically largely men. You know, it was quite a challenging place to be, to sort of stay in. You know, it was It's quite tricky at times. And I think really when I was chairperson, I just had a real sense of like everybody has a place here. And I wanted to make the Buddhist Centre somewhere where everybody would come. You know, I wanted the people with their families to feel much more at home. You know, we had kind of, you know, playgroup type stuff going on downstairs in the Buddhist Centre once a week. You know, we had those things. You know, Karen Vera was doing families retreats around that time at Rivendell. We were really kind of, you know, we weren't necessarily sitting down having planning meetings about it, but it was very much part of our ethos, I think, that we were inclusive. We wanted to have a place for everybody. And also, just to mention Amodana, who passed away recently, Akashiti's mum. And, you know, she was always a good generation above most of us who were around. And she stuck in, you know, with she challenged us sometimes, well, we were faffing around about doing. But, you know, she was always here, and she was a bit of a pioneer for, you know, older people. And there was Shudamanda, who was part of our community, who was a friend of hers, and Rosanna Manus, and people, you know, it was lovely. And of course, we had lots of younger people coming through as well. And it was just a really nice, diverse, mixed community where I hope more people felt at ease and at home, and that there was a place for them. So, yeah, that was just one of the things I wanted to mention. I think it probably, you know, it's all pervades now because the world's different now. You know, you don't have to come to a Buddhist centre to learn about meditation. There's all sorts of places where you can have access to it. But for us, it was like this was it. There wasn't anywhere else to go really, at that point. You know, so, yeah. So what the vibe was like, and who could feel that they could step in and have a place, you know, whether they were kind of, you know, slightly out of their heads in a really kind of difficult place of mental suffering, or idealistic and young and kind of wanting to, you know, revolutionise the world. Whoever they were, it's like there is a place there. So. And hopefully enough of a call of a sort of deeper sense that there's something quite profound here going on as well. We aren't just a social group of people having a nice time together or a difficult time together, whatever. You know, there's something else that's keeping us here. So, Karen Vera.
Shall I just start?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to say, it is 12:32. We're going to be, you know, we are sort of happening as we're happening. So we're due to finish this session at 12:45 lunch.
Yeah, if you're feeling a bit stiff, and if you want to move a bit in your chairs or stand up or shake, or you're yeah, a little bit. Yeah, sure. Have a bit of a move. Relax. Yeah, just shake out if you like. I'm going to stay standing up because it's just a little bit more comfortable. If you want to wiggle something, please wiggle something. Yeah. So yeah, what's that? Well, I'm going to do a postscript first. The stick that we hit the gong with. You see, these things are important. They might just look like little objects you buy on Amazon, but these little objects are really, they have history. And I remember meditating at the old Buddhist Centre in Park Cleveland, which is a bit like a large family house before we came here. And I remember Yeshadeva left a bit earlier. I thought, what's he doing? What's he up to? And in the basement there was a workshop. So when I dutifully did my long meditation, I went down to find you, and you were at the lathe. Yeah, you were turning this thing.
I remember making that.
No, you made that, but I remember watching you make this on the lathe, turning it, and so that's the kind of person you are. You sort of want to make something, and that's a lovely period of time where we made lots of things. I think one year we made a spaceship for what was the national festival for the movement. We made a cosmic spaceship out of yogurt pots, and it was the most ridiculous object. We spent weeks making this thing. Anyway, put that back in. Yeah, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about this time moving from what was a large family house to here. And so as an organisation, I think there was another shift at that point from being like a family, extended family, but really much like a family, everyone knew each other's name, to coming here, this building, where you actually could imagine it's just a completely different thing. And many people said to me, when a small business goes to a big business, often they fail. So when you shift from being a small family business to a big organization, often that's when things go really badly wrong and a lot of conflict and bankruptcy. But we managed it. We managed to make that move from what was a very beautiful place in the northern part of Brighton, Park Crescent, to here. And I remember going for a walk with you, Sandra, and before I was chair, and you may forget this, but you said something like, "You've got to find a building," or something like that. So I felt what's the right word? Instructed to help find a building. So that's why I started this. It was before I was chair, but it was a lead in really trying to find this building. So I'd like to just say a little bit about this building, because it's when we got in looking with the estate agent, you could touch the ceiling here. If you're on tiptoes, you could touch the ceiling. It looked like a corrugated roof, and the windows were quite low; they were that high. And so this top room was where this was the Co-op dairy for Brighton. And my mum, she's 96 now. She remembers this as a dairy. The milk floats are small, and they drive in through the double doors that you walked in. So they drive in. They're all battery, so it's green. battery milk floats. They drive in, and there's all this stuff on the ceiling in the reception room where the crates would be unloaded and the bottles washed, and the floor was sloped so that they could hose it down each night. So this building, if you can imagine it, was a derelict, well, not quite derelict, but it was an old dairy that hadn't been used for decades. So it's got this sort of history. So when we bought it, because of the inheritance through the years of other people, especially Dave Varaja, working his guts out, giving money to buy this family house place. So we managed to buy this place, and I think it took about a year to do it. So we took the roof up and put this in when we had no money. There were no funds to do it. And I remember thinking, we can't do this. But what you said, Mangla, was if you want something enough, you'll find a way. And we didn't have enough money for the lift or to take the roof up. And I remember one of my faults at that time was being overly optimistic and just riding a bit rough over things and saying, yeah, we'll do that. A little bit not very democratic. But we did it. And I was so pleased standing here that the roof isn't this high and it wasn't a sense of being cramped down, that we got this sort of upward movement. So that we tried to make this old dairy into, we worked for a while trying to make it a mythic place, a place that really has a sense of value in it. So as well as the sort of the structure of it, and I remember with Gina Palata in the basement, if you get a chance, if you've not been here before, in the basement room, it was even lower. It was this high. Yes. And we hired 2 pneumatic drills and drilled out the floor. Wow. Because it was covered in tiles and underneath quite a lot of screed. So we dug up the screed and make it high. The project was to make it high enough to do yoga in, so you could do yoga poses down there. So the whole place that was the fridge for the sausage making. And the whole place down there was white tile. It was really kind of a bit spooky and weird. So transforming that into this was a wonderful team thing. I mean, everyone mucked in, painting and doing all sorts of things. And it was a glorious time of working together, especially with Jim Palata. So we tried to make this place have a heart and kind of bit of depth. And so I want to say that if you take down the plasterboard on these sloping walls, you'll find behind the plasterboard hundreds of paintings, Buddhas, malas, these beads, poems, bits of writing. The one lovely evening, I think no, an afternoon, when we invited people, children, everyone to come along here. We climbed the ladders and we put all these things behind the plasterboard just before they nailed up the plasterboard and then plastered it. So all around here, there are wonderful things behind. And I like to remember that. So I wanted today to just remind us that when we're sat in this room, there's quite a lot going on up there. And under the floor, which I laid, this wooden floor, which I learned how to lay floors, underneath there are what are called mantras, so mostly Avalokiteshvara mantras, but also at the doors, different mantras. So every threshold through the building, before the floors went down, there were sort of sacred marks made on the concrete or the painted in. So when you go through the doorways, you're kind of, I know there's a sense of some meaning to the doorways and to the whole structure. So if you look up, if your neck is bad, don't do it. If you look up at the very apex of the building, which is the very center of this structure, you have this Vishvavajra, the cross Vajra, which is symbolic of indestructible stability, of wisdom, compassion, of truth. So it's a symbol that means absolute equipoise, no pull. And so that went, I remember building that, it was the front of a drum. It was a cover for the drum we had. Yeah, that one. It was a cover for the drum. And we got the Vishvavajra is on the drum as well. I don't know how long, tell me if I do that.
It doesn't to wind up.
Wind up, okay.
Wind up beautifully because you're there.
Okay, so the whole building was envisioned as a mandala, so sacred space. So the mandala has a circle of lotuses around it, and you see the wall lights made by Dom. They're lotus lamps, so that's the circle that's linked with purity. And then in the middle of the whole building, on this floor, we have this Paquin's image of the white lotus in the fire. And these are all words from, have like holly and ash and beech and cherry. They all have kind of symbolic meanings. I remember spending a Christmas period making that at my parents' workshop. And the image is a very lovely image of practice within the city. So Paquin's story is that, I haven't got time to do all this, but the idea is that if you practice where things are tough, the practice is very valuable. So if you practice when things are hard for you, it really does transform who you are. And this centre is a bit like the white lotus in the middle of the flames. So Brighton's got a hot city. Parami talked about it, and others. It's a hot city of drugs and rock and roll and everything else. And bringing the Buddhist centre a bit nearer the middle of all this, it felt important to have that kind of symbol here. That it's here because if we practice in the middle of all this, not just in the countryside and mountains, but where things are really real, where things are tough at times, when life is quite distracting and disturbing, then there's the opportunity to have a very deep practice coming from that. So that's a symbol. There's much more I could say about the symbolism of the building, but the east-west. And I'm just going to mention this. Down the south end, this is where I want to mention a Modena, whose picture's up there. Her practice was Ratnasambhava, and she would speak about the south end of the mandala, which is the southern portion of this golden Buddha. Up here we have the Amoghasiddhi, the green, the northern Buddha. So Arloka painted this for us. And it sort of help this idea of the sacred space emerge. So I won't say any more because I've run out of time, but it's not just a building, it's a religious artifact. The whole building, it has this kind of meaning to it. And sometimes we just walk through it with cups of tea and we don't really realise that. But really what makes it a sacred space is how we practice within it. So, and I think that's I'll stop there. Let's keep the practice going up here, especially those 3-day all-night readings. It's really what wonderful times of practicing together. Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. What a lovely way to finish up your piece. Thank you so much. I was going to say thank you for the fact that you've made that beautiful piece of marquetry, and how significant some of the symbolism has always been for me in this building. But you brought it in. So thank you very much. We have run out of time, but we are going to take some more time. So no, you don't get out of it, unfortunately. So we have Mokshani to talk to us. And we have a little piece from Siddhasi, who's unable to be here, but he's written something that's not here because he's on holiday, that I think Karshati is going to read. And Maitri Darshan is not going to speak particularly anymore because he's got little bits he's been saying during the weekend. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. We've got Mokshani. We're not going to hear particularly from Maitri Darshan because he's making other contributions during the weekend. But of course we include him in our line of whatever.
Dr. Who's.
Yeah, Dr. Who's. No. And Akashati is going to bring something in from Siddhasi that he's written because he's not able to be with us. So 14 minutes for your piece, Mokshani. I'd like to say welcome back, lovely to see you. And then we'll have Siddhasi's bit that we'll read out. And I'm afraid that's probably going to round up questions and conversation. We'll have to have another lunch. I think we're all quite capable of that. We'll chat, so we'll do it downstairs.
Gosh, so I was sitting here, and partly I'm aware that the last time I sat here in this room at this end of the of people was 10 years ago, at the 40th anniversary, which was my last big bash at the Buddhist Center. And then I left in 2015. And I'm already completely aware that everything that happens here is such a collective endeavor. So, there's a few people who stand out, but I know when I was chair, I was just so grateful. It does not happen if people they have to do the classes, but somebody has to put the rubbish out or do the website or do all kinds of things. And it's like a relay race and a collective thing. And I do rejoice in the fact that it's still going and growing from strength to strength. So when I was told I'd sit here, and like him and Andy, the memories that went off like a firework. So I just thought I'd share one thing that stood out of many things, really. But my memory is that actually the early 2000s were quite a tricky time, all kinds of ways, but also in the order. It wasn't difficult, a bit of lack of confidence and insecurity and questioning. And I was very aware when I started being chair that I thought at least that all kinds of people could read things about us that were critical. And I guess I really love the order. I know we're not perfect in all kinds of ways, but I really love the Dharma and the ideas and the heart that goes into practice. And I guess I was quite, I wanted it to be public. I wanted people to really see the center, and because I also thought if people know somebody from here or see us, they will think, well, even if I read something nasty, I know that person, and they're actually quite lovely. So one thing I did remember, and had lots of joy, was the public events. My goodness, did we have loads of public events? And partly the Times, and partly, of course, I have to mention Lucy and Vidya Dasa, for example, as the creative and artistic members of the community very much. Because one thing I remember was the Brighton Festival parades. Did we go for it? I mean, the Wheel of Life, we had Indra Buddha, being carried by 4 great kings, some of which sit here still. Mahasukha and the Devas, and I was a hell being, you were a hell being. I ended up on the front with the leader because it was such a fantastic costume. Hungry ghosts and the lot and animals, and I have to say one of the happiest moments of being chair was when we'd carried that golden body. It was a fantastic day, blue sky, and thousands of people saw us. We were just so public. And then we got to the seafront, and I'd go on ahead to take a photo, and there was this Buddha against the blue sky, and thousands of people saw us carrying this Buddha in Brighton down the seafront, and there's something of being out and proud. And we did quite a bit of that. But we had burning of the clocks a few times, that big stupa, Darling Literary slogan, cherish the Dharma, live united, radiate love. And again, it was something there were thousands. It was just such a, that everybody saw it. And the White Nights, my goodness, didn't last that long, 2 or 3 years, because but having the centre open all night with lots of happened in Brighton as well, and people doing pujas all through the night. There was something about being very public, and the centre was very open. I was quite a lot of the interfaith things, so we had quite a few interfaith events at the centre. When I was thinking about it, there were loads of things we did, of course. School visits. I think every single primary school and most secondary schools used to come, perhaps they still come. But I liked being known, the carers events. My goodness.
What about family retreats?
Pardon?
Family
Family
retreats.
retreats. For my son, the family retreats are a really strong part of his life, and that really have shaped him.
And he's a lovely young man.
I think he's lovely, but I'm biased. Anyway, and then there's loads of things that happen, also of a more specifically dynamic nature, they also happened. But it's interesting, that's one thing I really felt, I felt joy, just the whole public we could be, partly because so many people worked very, very hard in giving their skills and expertise and time to make it happen, to have a reception every day. It is effort, and so I feel full of gratitude, I have to say, and I made it go on that loads of us and more feel inspired to just give and keep this show on the road, to make it available and accessible to so many people and known. A couple of last memories, like in my yoga, I taught yoga here as well, and I was aware that loads of them did not make the transition to becoming Buddhists, which I think was partly the hope. But I was aware how much they valued being able to come into this space. They could have gone to any other yoga class, but they wanted to be in a Buddhist center, and it added something to their life. And that might not be our main reason for existing, but it made me very happy that people value the presence of a center, and that it's so easy to come here and start off a journey of learning about the Dharma and being part of a Sangha, getting to know other people. So, yes, may it continue, and I do rejoice in the current team, everybody who's involved around Maharishi Darshan and others, keeping it going with so much heart and beauty. It's great to be here again, I have to say. Spent many hours in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much. Happy to be reminded of that sort of out and proud, which of course is part of Brighton culture in every way, but it's like, it was a difficult time, so it was brave. and courageous to be taking this stance. So we moved on to Mike Darshan and sorry, we moved on to Subadasi. And so we're now going to have a little piece that he's written, or maybe it's a piece that he's written prior to going on holiday with his family. So, from Subadasi. When Mokshini asked me to consider becoming chair of Brighton Buddhist Centre in 2015, I was willing to step up because there was a clear need for someone to take on the role. And it has always been important to me to find ways to serve Triratna and serve the Dharma. As I was planning to step down from the role in 2020, the country was put into lockdown due to COVID, and it was a strange thing indeed to find myself closing down and locking up the empty centre with no clear notion as to when I or other people who work there would be able to return. I'm very pleased that the Buddhist Centre survived that strange period and is going from strength to strength through the support and generosity of Maitri Darshan and the rest of the team. Brighton Buddhist Centre, I wish you many happy returns on your 50th birthday. I hope that you go from strength to strength over the next 50 years. At your 100th birthday party, very few of us who are here today will be there then, and we cannot imagine how the centre will be, who will run it, and who will be part of the Sangha. But perhaps we can imagine that the flow of practice that's been generated over the last 50 years, that we and others have contributed to will inform in indefinable ways the flow of practice that is alive in 2074. Love, Subadasi. Just by way of winding up, I would like to take a moment just to very, very briefly rejoice in Maitri Darshan.
Yeah.
To everybody.